When we're speaking English, should we say Beijing or Peking? The city has changed name several times, but between 1368 and today, it's always been called some version of either Beijing or Beiping by speakers of Mandarin. So, why does the city currently seem to have two English names, Beijing and Peking? And which one is correct? Unless you are a historian, you're very unlikely to come across the ancient name Beiping, so we will leave that one alone. To understand more about the differences between Peking and Beijing, we need to understand something about the way Chinese is written. Since 1949, the name of the city has been made up of the following two Chinese characters, pronounced here in Mandarin. Bei, which means north, and Jing, which means capital. So the city literally is called the northern capital, as opposed to the southern capital of Nanjing, which served as the capital city for many years of Chinese history. Quick side note, the capital city of Japan is called Dongjing, or East Capital in Chinese. Sadly though, for completists, there is no West capital, although Xi'an, meaning Western Peace, is probably the closest. We all know that spoken Chinese is represented in writing with Chinese characters. We also know that English is written using the Latin alphabet, with different letters representing different sounds. So, if we're writing the name of a Chinese place in English, we need to figure out a way to represent the sounds of spoken Chinese using our Latin alphabet. This is a surprisingly complex process referred to as transliteration, or more specifically, Romanization, since we are transliterating into the Latin alphabet. Since the 1950s, China has applied one unified standard for transliteration, with very clear rules which are easy to apply consistently. That method, known as Standard Hanyu Pinyin, says that the bei sound should be written with the Latin letters bei, B-E-I, and that jing should be J-I-N-G.
北京，北京。
However, prior to the 1950s, Western travelers and scholars had to pick their own methods of transliteration. One scholar would write using one method, scholars from another country would write using others. One of the most popular of the competing methods was called Wade-Giles. Wade-Giles is named after Thomas Francis Wade, the first professor of Chinese at Cambridge University, and Herbert A. Giles, who published the Chinese to English dictionary in 1892. Their transliteration methodology included the following rule. An unaspirated voiceless bilabel plosive initial is written by the letter P.
B.
Those are scary linguistics terms, but just mean that the sound B is written using the English letter P. So now we're beginning to see what's happening. In fact, the name of the city in English has never changed. It's just that people who read the term in Wade-Giles and who don't know the rules of Wade-Giles see the English letter P and assume it should be pronounced like an English letter P. In fact, it should be read as a Chinese unaspirated voiceless bilabel plosive initial, that is, B. A similar process explains the difference between the J and the K. The city was never supposed to be called Peking in English. It was written as Peking only following Wade-Giles Romanization rules. The city we are talking about has been called Beijing all along to Mandarin speakers. There are two fascinating side notes here. The first Chinese people that Westerners encountered regularly tended to be from coastal areas and tended to speak as their mother tongue dialects other than the Beijing dialect. Some of the early forms of transliteration were complicated significantly by the fact that these forms of pronunciation were based on these other dialects, or at least very strong accents. Imagine if you first met English speakers who were from New York and they taught you how to spell with their New York accents. Well, it might seem like Wade-Giles is objectively worse than Standard Hanyu Pinyin, but one of the reasons for the confusion was that Wade-Giles was attempting to use English letters to show the tones of Chinese words, whereas Hanyu Pinyin takes the much easier approach of using special tone markers above the words to show their tones. At the time, it wasn't possible to type or write using these tones, Sandy, in English the way it is now, so maybe we can forgive them. To summarize, In the past, English speakers used a method of transliteration which used the English letter P to represent the B sound from the word Beijing. Nowadays, there's a newer system promoted by the Chinese government rather than by Westerners, which allows us to use the English letter B to represent that sound. The old J sound was spelled as a K, and the new one uses the letter J. The closest spelling in English to the word is Beijing, Beijing. So, please use the English term Beijing when speaking English most of the time. But be aware that some institutions have decided to keep the English word Peking. For example, the famous university is Beijing Daxue when you're speaking Chinese, but Peking University in English. I'm David Smith, a translator. Learn more about me at davidsmithtranslation.com or check the links below for some references.